Hi, I'm Angela Wolf. Welcome back to the Sew Along. So in the last step, you just sewed your entire seam from your sleeve to the hem, make sure it's serged, press it to the back, and now we are ready to attach our cuff. But to make it easier for you to see, I already have a sleeve all by its lonesome. And this is all sewn. You have for your cuff, the outside cuff and the inside cuff. Something that I have found that makes it really easy is to flip up the seam allowance on one end of the cuff and press it. You'll see why in a minute. For now, just take one piece of the cuff, and we're going to, let's see, find my notch here. We're just going to pin this in place. There's my matching notch. I'm just going to put one pin here because you really don't need pins for this. So with right sides together, I'm just going to the sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch whatever your seam allowance is for your pattern. Again, if it's 5/8 of an inch, you might want to trim it to 3/8 of an inch to make it easier to sew, or just sew it and then trim off. My pattern actually had, what you can see there, little darts, or pleats I should say. So I just basted those in place. So if you have that on your pattern, make sure you do that before you add this cuff. All right, get to the other side. So what I've done here is I've attached one part of the cuff, all right? And you should have seam allowances. The next step is going to be to attach the inside of the cuff. So this part that's folded is going to be the part that meets up here. So just flip that around, and we're going to stitch. I'm just going to put a pin here to hold this in place. I'm going to flip this up at the edge, and we're going to stitch from right on the edge of that placket. Stitch all the way down and around. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do half of the cuff here for you because you'll get the idea. Stitch down to whatever your seam allowance is. Again, you could be creative on this. You could make larger cuffs, smaller cuffs. There's a lot you can do here. All right, I'm just going to stitch down a little ways and show you what this looks like. You're going to do the exact same thing up the other side. I'm going to trim off my seam allowance, trim off the corner, making sure I don't cut off those stitches. All right, now let's go back up and press. So up here for pressing, a couple things I want to do. You would put this on a point press and press this open, but I wanted to show you in case you don't have a point press, that's another way of pressing this open, your seam allowance. And then I'm just going to take this and turn it to the right side out, give it a good press, use your tailor's clapper to make a nice crease. And then what I want to show you here is you're going to press all the way around so that's nice and flat. And on the inside, if I can get my hands out of the way, I'm just going to press you're pressing the seam allowance from the shirt into the cuff. And because I've already pressed this up, I can just take this over and go like that. So I have one here. You can see I've already pressed all of this in place. Let's go back to the sewing machine for one last quick step. So now, again, you always are top stitching from the right side of the fabric, and I'm just going to start on one of the ends. If for some reason your fabric is really thick, go ahead and give it a good hammering if you have to on the edges. Just do it from the wrong side. I'm going to push in that black button. I'm going to change my stitch to a 3.5 so it's a nice looking top stitch, and then just go around the edge of your cuff. When you get to the end, again, just flip it around. If you need to, go ahead and push in that black button again, stitch. And I'm just going to go around to one more edge just to show you what's going to happen here. You've already pressed under that edge underneath. So this makes it really easy. Get to the edge. We're stitching. Okay, now this is the tricky part. Just flip this and go one more stitch. I'm going to just kind of get over that little hump right there. And we're going to stitch. And the one thing I'm going to stitch is this flap is enclosing that seam allowance, and I can feel that underneath of there. So I'll just do this for a little ways and then stop, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So I'll stitch all the way to the end, and if I want to do a whole second row of stitching, I can. But on the back side, see how that encloses that? So the inside's finished, the outside's finished, add a few more rows of top stitching. Go ahead and do your other sleeve, and then I will meet you back and we're going to sew on buttons.